Okay, so we are with Dutch and Linda Ortega, longtime members of the Globe Stake. It is August 8th, 2024. This is part of the Globe Stake 50th video series. Like to start with your backgrounds, and maybe we can start with Sister Ortega. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, what life was like growing up, and did you know anything about the church while you were growing up?
Well, I grew up in Young. We had a ranch, but we did live close to the community. The only church there was the Southern Baptist Church, which my siblings and I attended. We were faithful Sunday school kids. Our parents did not go to church. We were Christians. We had a Bible, but nobody read it. No one seemed to know how to pray except on special occasions. And anyway, we had a good school there. Started out with, there were 8 in my class. And then in my junior year of high school, I came to Globe to finish school and lived with my sister who worked here. And this is how Dutch and I met. They had dances, country dances out at Roosevelt once a month. And my friend said, "You've got to go to the dance." So it was October in 1957, I believe, or 56. And this handsome cowboy asked me to dance. And that's how we met. And the rest is kind of history. We've been married 62 years and have 4 children. Dutch ran the J. Webb's Ranch that's across the lake and the river. In the winter, we lived at the A Cross. It's an old ranger station. And in the summer, we'd go to Rose Creek and take the cattle up there. And we had our first child, Lori, and she was about 2 years old. And I said, "Dutch, I want you to take me to town. I'm going to go church shopping. I want to find one that knows something about God. I've been asking questions all my life, and no one could answer my questions." And the Lord has a way of moving things into place. And at the neighboring ranch, Joe Bassett, that owned it, his daughter and her husband and children moved into that ranch. I think it was about 2 miles away, our closest neighbor. And I got acquainted with Shirley Schill. And she said, "Would you like to read my husband's missionary books?" And I sure would. I had never had anybody tell me about the church. And I have a very inquisitive mind, so I took her husband's missionary books home and started reading. And my dad had asked me to gather the family history. And this all happened at once. The Lord kind of moves things into place. And Shirley Schill said there's a family history class at the church. And so that's where Dutch took me and dropped me off. And me and my little girl, and we went to the family history class. And Louise Kiefer, talk about a mentor. She was the teacher, and she had a strong testimony, and she was excellent and very encouraging. And once I started grasping the idea of eternal families, and that families need to have ordinances done for them at the temple. No one had ever told me what the temple was for before. I started gathering the history, and I'm still gathering it. It's turned into a mission for my life and given me great purpose. I don't know who I'm going to leave all my records to, no one seems to want to pick up, but I'm trying to leave breadcrumbs so that whoever comes behind me can pick up and know where I left off with my searches. Anyway, I started going to family history class, started gathering the names, and I wanted to get Dutch's people and my people to get our names to the temple. And I was reading the Book of Mormon, and I read it in 3 months, and I prayed about it, and the Holy Spirit says, "You already know it's true. What are you doing this for?" Well, you're supposed to get this burning feeling or something amazing. And I was a little embarrassed, but I knew the Spirit was right. I already knew it was true, but I hesitated. I didn't know how my husband would take it, me becoming a Mormon, and wasn't sure if he'd like that. But anyway, I came into church in the wintertime into Globe, and I asked the bishop twice if I could be baptized. And he just would shake my hand and say, "That's nice." And I thought, well, Brigham Young studied for 2 years. I'll just keep studying. And so I just kept getting more books and kept studying. And after 2 years, I think he finally understood what I was asking, and sent the stake missionaries out to give me the lessons, which I was already ready. I just wanted to be baptized, and I wanted to get my people's names to the temple. So anyway, it finally happened in 1965. I got baptized, and a few of my family members made some snide remarks, like, don't, Mormons have horns and that sort of thing. But it's been a great journey, and I'm so thankful for the Shirley Schill and for Louise Kiefer for their testimonies. And then one Easter Sunday, Louise Kiefer was speaking in Sacrament, and she told about the Savior appearing to the Nephites. I had never heard this before, and I guess I wasn't that far along in reading the Book of Mormon. I don't know, but my thought was that beautiful woman really believes that. I mean, it just seemed kind of it was new to me, but her testimony, I can still see her giving that talk, and so I could say she's one that really influenced me. And I have gathered a lot of names, and it's been miraculous how some of it has come to me. I would get the brown envelopes in the mail. Back then, you did it all by writing letters, and here would come a big brown envelope full of names, and you really feel the Spirit when the names are just come to you by some others' research and their work. That has carried me through when there was hard times. Everybody has some hard times, but the family history work has just strengthened me and given me purpose. Now in the summer, we would go to the branch up in Young, and the Flakes had bought a ranch next door to my dad's, and they held the meetings at the little branch, and they were wonderful people.
Now, when you say flakes,
Okay.
there's so many in Arizona, you
Okay.
have to be more specific. Can
Well,
you
it
tell
was
us which flakes?
Virgil Blake's boys, and it started with Jake and Mary Louise Skousen. Her uncle is Cleon Skousen, and I got some of his books too, and I'm really addicted to books, good books. And then there were the Russells from Mesa that came there. They lived at Hagler Creek, and I can still see Sister Russell leading us in the song "How Lovely Was the Morning" and singing it. But the Flake boys, as soon as they got a child old enough for school, they would go back to Snowflake, and the next brother would come. So there was Jake, and then there was Jetty, and then there was Steve. all three of them, they could be young till they got children old enough to go to school, and then they'd go back to Snowflake. And then they got somebody else to run that ranch. But in the meantime, my mom joined the church. Jetty Flake visited with her, and
Was she still up and young when she joined?
yes, my parents were there, yeah, and she had lost twin boys that lived 3 hours, and that had really caused a depression with her. But when Jetty explained to her that she would see those boys again, it gave her hope, and she joined the church. But going back to Jetty, like he and Ruth, she was a Rogers, his wife. They were at the temple, and they had been visiting with my mom and visiting with my grandmother. And this is the Bar X ranch they lived on. And my uncle, Frank Hott, who happens to be Mick Holder's father, was at that ranch, and he was kicked in the back. And then he died as that injury caused dislocation of his kidney. But with my story, Jetty went to the temple. I had sent Frank Hott's name to Salt Lake, and usually it would take about 3 months to get the names back. Jetty got Frank Hott's name to do the work for. And he said, I couldn't wait till I could go to the chapel and show my wife what name I had, and I had Frank Hott's name to do the work for. And that's kind of like 1 in a million, because names are sent. So at that time, there were only 14 temples, but names are sent all over. So that was a really special testimony. Frank was only 22. He was married, and they had one child, Mick. But everybody said he was a great guy. So
Now, I think it's important to know your maiden name was Hott.
yes. So he was one of my dad's younger brothers. And then going back in time, in 1926, missionaries came from Snowflake. They actually, one of them was from Utah, and they came to Young. And as I said, only church there was Southern Baptist. And so the Mormon missionaries stayed at my grandpa's ranch. They really weren't welcome in the town of Young, or the little village. And anyway, they baptized my grandmother in Cherry Creek, and my Aunt Virgie Joy were both baptized in 1926. And my dad was just a young lad, and he said, I wondered why Mom didn't have something done for us other kids. Her youngest child, Austin, was just a baby, and he was blessed. But Dad knew that how come he and the other boys didn't get something done, but that stuck with him.
Did you know about this while you were growing up, or did you learn after you joined the church that they had been baptized?
I think it was after I joined, my grandma told me that she'd been baptized in Cherry Creek, but there never was a branch there at that time, so she never had a chance to participate in the church, so it didn't grow.
So growing up, did you have any, did you know anything at all about the church, or was it just because Young just had the Southern Baptist Church? You really didn't
Very little. There was the Fuller family that were LDS, but the father had died, so Helen was a widow. And then there was Lois and Polk Fuller, like married to cousins. And those ladies at one time started a primary. Well, all the kids rode the bus and got off at the Fuller home for primary. And it only lasted a month or two. The Lois Fuller wasn't well, and so I think that's why. But
did you go to the primary?
I did for about a month or two, and they made a little children's hospital out of a shoebox, and we took our pennies for the penny drive for the children's hospital, and it had a little flag on it, and we left it, and everybody went. The bus stopped, and we all hopped off. But it only lasted a month or two. So So that was really my first, I think, knowledge of the church, you know.
Now, you mentioned sort of really becoming acquainted with the church through family history, and that was down in Globe, right?
That was in Globe.
Yes. So this would have been with the old building. Is that where the family history library was at that time?
Well, we helped start it. We didn't have a library at that time. That was way before we got a library. Betty Domlin and I and Sister Kiefer. Sister Kiefer said, we need to ask Salt Lake for a library. I think we can get one. And she said, if you tell them it's for the youth, she said, they'll really build things for the youth. And so we kind of, I don't remember who wrote the letter, but we wrote letters to Salt Lake telling them that we needed a library. And I rode up to Salt Lake with Betty Domlin and her daughter, Beverly, and her mother. We picked her mother up at a place called Dutch John up in I think it's in Utah. And the mother went with us down to Salt Lake, down to Provo for the genealogy conference. And we found more information on getting a library established. But this is when the library got established. It was quite a few years later before we had the library.
Was it before this current building was built,
No,
or was it after?
It was in the old building.
Okay, so it was in the old building.
It was in the old building right before we became a stake. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's turn to Dutch. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, Dutch? Growing up, where you grew up, and what life was like, that type of thing.
Well, I grew up in El Capitan, south of Globe here, and we had cattle. We had quite a few head of cattle, and then we raised a lot of vegetables. We irrigated out of the creek, and
what kind of vegetables?
We had tomatoes,
Squashes.
Back then, you could go and sell to the stores, which you can't do nowadays. But then you could, and my dad would pick up a load of vegetables and sell them to the stores, and then we had an orchard, which we had a lot of peaches, and we just raised a lot of stuff in that place, and we used to give it. There was a little mining town, Silver Creek. It wasn't a town; it was just poor people that worked in this particular mine. And my dad would go and give them vegetables and whatever to help the people that were so poor. And she was asking about my name, Dutch. They're the ones that named me my dad, they called him the Old Dutchman. Why, I don't know, but that's those people started my name and called me Little Dutch.
How old were you at the time?
Oh, I'd say probably 8 years old. You know, I was pretty small. And I'd go with him to help to deliver to those people. And we went to school there at El Capitan my first 2 years, first and second grade. There were several of us. Where the people come from, I don't know, but there was quite a few people. The first row was first graders, second row, second graders, and on up to the sixth grade. And then sixth grade, you had to come to Globe to school. And we was raised hard, but we had a good life. Let's put it that way. And talking about religion, my mother used to read the Bible to us kids. And not all the time, but occasionally. And we didn't belong, they were, mom and dad, they were Catholics. And when they did go to church, they used to go down to Winkelman because it was closer. Well, I wouldn't go because I wasn't about to go to church. So that's me and my brother. We were the ones that didn't go. But we had we just had a good life. You know, it was hard. You had to work. You couldn't just sit around and watch things grow and not tend to them. And then when they closed the school, my dad bought a house there in Central Heights, and we stayed Central Heights and rode the bus to Globe to school. And then speaking of how me and Linda met, we met at that dances at the Roosevelt, and we dated for a couple of years, and we married and raised our children, and we've had a good life, both of us together. We just, the only problem is age is catching up with us. So, but that's about all I can say about myself.
Well, let me ask this. When you were growing up, did you know any members of the church? Had you heard anything at all about the church?
Well, let me back up a little bit. My dad first, he lost his first wife in
Flu epidemic,
1916, I think.
Wow.
Lost his children, lost two children and his first wife. And he farmed right there with those Mormons. My oldest sister, she said, I can remember when them Mormon ladies used to come and you know, back then you had to boil the water till when you wash clothes and all this stuff. And they'd come and wash the clothes there with a mother. Just good neighbors.
That was at Fort Thomas.
They're at Fort Thomas. And my mother, she was raised at Ivipa, and that's where my dad met her. And my dad had a ranch there at Stanley Butte, and then he sold everything out and moved to El Capitan.
So,
but in fact, I shouldn't say this, but my dad we had cows we milked, and one of them, he named her a Mormon.
why did you name the cow Mormon?
Well, I never did know. She was an excellent cow.
Well,
So
Maybe she had lots of babies.
I don't know, but no, he'd been around Mormon people on Fort Thomas, where he had a farm and stuff way years before. But there never was no criticism of so-and-so's religion or nothing. That was all. I didn't grow up with that. We respected everybody's belief.
So, well, Sister Ortega's told us a little bit about how she joined the church. The two of you were married at the time. What did you think when she said she wanted to join the church?
Well, I thought it was, you know, it was all right. But I wasn't ready then, yet. Why, I don't know why I wasn't ready, but I wasn't ready. And then when Jake Flake moved in up to Young, he set a good example for me. Him and I was pretty close. And then I had on the lower ranch, I had Frank Shield. He was another one. He set a very good example for me. And I had a lot of respect for those two men. And they talked about church, but very lightly. They didn't try to, what I liked about them, they didn't try to force it on me. But,
Do you think their examples helped when you did decide to join the church?
pardon?
When you decided to join the church, do you think part of it may have been some of their example?
Yeah, I did. And in fact, Jake Flake, he's the one that baptized me. And Frank Shield was there. They were both there here when I joined, and they set a good example for me. They were good men.
Do you want to tell us what eventually led to you join the church? What
Well,
made you decide at this time?
I don't know how to really put it, but it just kind of felt like a load come off of my shoulders, just felt at ease. And felt good about it. And I try to do what's right. I try to, do what you're supposed to do in church.
So now, when you joined the church, your kids were all grown, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And this, I guess, this is a question kind of for Sister Ortega. What was it like? You joined the church. Dutch hadn't. Bringing the kids to church all those years. Was it ever a challenge?
It was hard. It was really hard. It was. Dutch had always supported me with my callings, but the kids, it just made it hard. I think they felt like they didn't fit in. They've kind of voiced it in these later years that they felt like they didn't fit in because we weren't a whole family in the church, And I even wrote a letter to President Benson. Being a part member, you're just kind of like a stepchild. That's how I felt. And I wasn't alone in that. There were a lot of women like me. And I wrote a letter to President Benson, and I got a letter back from his secretary and said, go to your stake, leaders. But the suggestions I put in that letter, in a few months, the bishops got a letter, and it was those suggestions I'd put in that letter. If the husband's willing, let the bishop interview him, and if everything's in order, why couldn't us women, join the church? And it finally happened. Took a long time, but it finally happened. I was baptized in 1965, and I got my endowment in 1986. So there was a few years there. It's not easy for the woman to sit alone on the row with and the kids would start, they poke each other or whatever. And they were shocked when their dad joined the church. I think they were impressed, but I think they were really surprised.
Well, certainly is a good thing. Let me ask this. What memories do you have about the creation of the stake? Because you were here, you remember already when the stake was created. So Why don't you tell us some of those memories? And
Well, Fern McClendon said, you have to go. We're going to be made a stake. We're going down to Thatcher because that's where we went for the meetings. Like we'd been in primary and we had to go to Fort Thomas for some of those meetings. And that's when BJ Cecil was made our first stake president. It was really quite exciting. You know, it was just an exciting time. It was great.
now, shortly after the stake was created, within a few years, this new stake center or this
Right.
stake center was built.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about your participation in building in the stake center?
Well, we were allowed to participate in it. We were told it was the last building that they let the local members actually work, help build one. And then we were assessed a monetary assessment to help with the building fund. And at that time, money was quite tight. And I had a little store up in Payson where it was an antique shop with Native American jewelry, etc. And I had my assessment of what I had to pay. And I thought, where's that money coming from? And I got a phone call from the lady I had bought the shop from. And she said, do you still have this certain necklace? I have a friend that wants to buy it. And this lady bought that necklace from me. It was the exact amount I needed to pay for my assessment for the building. And that was pretty neat.
So at this point, Dutch isn't a member of the church.
No.
What, Dutch, do you recall any of this? And did you have any thoughts about, well, I have to pay an assessment for the building?
I don't think he knew about it.
I was working out on the road construction, and that was the only time I was home was on weekends. I'd come home Friday nights, and I'd leave Sunday nights because we was building roads all over around the state, and I supported her. She, I know, had to do things by herself, but
Yeah.
Also, going back to working on the building, I got to help paint, and it was kind of like a Zion Society for a while. Everybody was excited up here. Everybody worked together. The building was not enclosed. It was winter. I think it was January, and the sleet was flying, and it was cold. The wind would blow through this building, and Dale Taylor was kind of a project manager, I think, and they got Sandy. She was Sandy Haverland at that time, and I up on the scaffold because we were some of the younger ones, and we painted that gym, that cultural hall, from the bare blocks at least twice. And it's quite a job, but we loved every bit of it. It was cool. And we painted most of the classroom rooms we painted, and the chapel, we painted it. And some of the ladies, Linda Wheeler from Miami was one that helped when I was there. There were a few of the ladies, but Sandy and I did a lot, and it was really fun.
So I've got to ask you, because my dad was a painting contractor growing up for a few years. So how did you paint the block?
Well, we had rollers, and BJ Cecil had picked out the color. If you ever wonder why that color we have, I don't know if he called it bisque or what it was, but he picked the color, and there were big buckets of paint, and we painted and painted and painted. But at the end, when we had the dedication of the building, when we sang "The Spirit of God like a fire is burning," the angels from on high were singing with us. You could not hold back the tears when that song was sang. It was very memorable. we won't forget that feeling that we had.
Wonderful. Do you have any, well, wonder if we could talk about maybe some of the service opportunities you've had. The two of you have, I believe you worked in the temple. You got called to serve in the Superior Branch. Would you like to talk about some of those service opportunities that you've had over the years?
I think Dutch can help me with both of those. Down in Superior,
We did the Spanish station, or help.
Yes.
That's what we went down for, to help with the Spanish sisters. And my Spanish is, what's the word they use? It's not very good. So we had a little trouble with trying to communicate with some of those people. And but we enjoyed it. We got to where we were.
Well, we had separate sacrament meetings, and our branch president he wanted everybody in that little Spanish congregation to give their testimony. And as Anglos, we could get up and give ours, and one of them would stand beside us, one of the Hispanic brothers or sisters, and the teenagers too, kids. And then they would be brave enough then to bear their testimony. So on our testimony meetings, everybody in the little group would bear their testimony. It was just really sweet. I'm trying to think. His name was Corey Nephi. I can't think of his last name. That was our branch president. We had some special experiences. And of course, when we had the linger longers, the meals, we had a huge attendance down there when we had those. And then picking up the members, we would go around and pick them up for the meetings. And I didn't realize some of them were not legal. And if we saw a policeman, they would all duck in the back seat of our car. And I thought, oh my goodness, at that time I held a county office, and I thought, what if we're pulled over and these 10 people in the back seat are not citizens of the United States? It never did happen. We were safe. But that was one of the experiences. There was some wonderful people there. And then after that, we served at the baptistry and at the Gilbert Temple. We served for the open house and led the groups of visitors. And that was just awesome. The comments they would make about how beautiful the building was. And then we served in the baptistry for 2 years. And we really grew to love our group that we served with. And we worked hard. It was hard work, but it was really special. And we would go on Fridays, and a lot of people don't want to serve in the temple on Friday. They'd rather be at home, but we drove down for 2 years, and we had a blowout on the freeway, and our car nothing happened till we got off the freeway. We could have been killed easily. A truck went by and threw a piece of metal that just slipped my tires. But after we got off, we were real close, half a block from a tire place there off of Power Road. Went right in there and got our tire fixed. But that was a scary thing. And then another scary Mormon morning, we had getting ready to go to the temple, and there was a little rattlesnake under a little heater in our family room. And we took care of that, but that could have been bad. But there were a few things that we knew the Lord was blessing us for being at the temple, and it was good times.
So, You mentioned, Sister Ortega, that you're a public official. You were county recorder for a number of years, and anything about that experience that you'd like to share?
Well, it was kind of like natural because I was of my background with I'd been in real estate before, and I knew about documents, and then my love for family history. It just the Lord blessed us. He really blessed us, and I enjoyed that work, and I really tried to help my customers that came in. And at that time, uh, there was a notice about downwinders money for anybody that had been here in Gila County a certain period of time when they were doing the atomic blast up in Utah. And so I helped about 1,000 people to get that $50,000. With I knew they could find a voting record of their parents, and they could find different. I knew what records to tell them to get, and that that was a great thing to be able to do. But I enjoyed that work. But after 15 years, I just wanted to be home and wanted to work more on our family history.
So, and this is for both of you, either one of you, in your time in the stake, have there been any particular activities or events that we haven't gone over that have been memorable that you'd like to talk about?
But when I was the stake family history librarian, we put on a big conference, and people came from all over the state. Our cultural hall was full. We had different classes, and we just had a wonderful conference, a genealogy conference. I look back and think, how did that all happen? But everybody worked together, and it turned out really well. It was very well attended, and that was years ago, but it was good.
Great. A couple things like to. Oops. There we go. I guess two things. Is there anything else? Any other thoughts that you have that you'd like to share? And I'd also like to invite both of you to leave a brief testimony.
I think Dutch and I getting to do the temple ordinances for his family and mine was one of the highlights of our lives to be able to do that. There's still many more names to do the work for, but it really makes the temple. The temple is special, but it's really you really feel the spirit when you're there for your loved ones.
Makes us feel pretty special when you able to do that for your ancestors. Lost people out there that need help.
We feel like we've been blessed. We have 14 grandkids, 7 boys, 7 girls. We have about 15 great grandchildren. It's temple work will bless you. I can just put it that way. Gathering the family history will bless you. It will build bridges in your family. I've been having people contact me lately and want to know a family history on my side and on Dutch's side both. And we had some wonderful, hardworking people in our family trees. I can't say we had famous ones, but we really love and appreciate our ancestors and what they went through, especially what our parents went through and how hardworking they were. Everybody would say on his side and mine that they're hardworking people, and that means a lot.
Anything else you'd like to share?
Well, I have a testimony that this work is true and that Heavenly Father lives and that Jesus is the Christ and that the church, the ordinances and the priesthood have been restored and that Joseph Smith was instrumental under the direction of Heavenly Father and the Savior. And I love the scriptures. I love what the prophets have taught us. I've been reading about Abraham, and the more I read, the more I learn, and I so appreciate it.
Yes, I have Jesus is the Christ. Church is true. And that's my testimony.
And we've been blessed.
And we've been blessed.
And I go back to what Brother Machula said, when you do good, you feel good. When you do bad, you'll feel bad. And that's simple gospel right there.
Well, I think both of you should be feeling just fabulous then because you've done a lot of good. You've been great examples to us. And I really appreciate you being willing to share some of your stories. Again, you've been great examples. And, we're very fortunate to have you in our stake. So thank you very much for visiting with us.